Happy Monday to you fine folks. This is Gerardo Del Real along with my co-host, Outsider Club founder Nick Hodge, and this is episode 12 of Bizarro World. Nick, how are you?
We've reached the dirty dozen. I'm doing really good, actually. So we're ready to get into this podcast.
That's good. There is lots to talk about. We got fuckery at Miramont Resources down a cozy 75% the last time I checked over the past couple of days. Brexit has been delayed. The dollar is surging as I thought it would. We have European and Turkish debt, which I believe is a powder keg waiting to explode within the next couple of months. I don't think it's a coincidence. The 10-year yield here in the U.S. has dropped the way it's dropped. And I don't think it's a coincidence that the curve yield, the inverted yield curve is really starting to get the attention of big money. Lots to talk about. Gold has held up relatively well. It's below 1,300, but it's held up well despite the fact that the dollar has performed well in the past week. Man, what else? Jussie Smollett had all his charges dropped. The Purdue family of kingpins reached their first settlement. And the Mueller Report, which nobody's read, but everybody's got a fucking opinion about, is out. So lots to get to. Where should we start? Should we start with the markets?
I've been smiling all week at this news cycle. It's been incredible, and not smiling at the 100 million supposed dead pigs in China, which we'll get to. But you were on a roll with the intro, so keep going on the dollar. Explain with the inverted yield curve. If I know something about any of that, I'll chime in.
Yeah, no, the bottom line is typically when you see an inverted yield curve, it just means that there's a graph that plots the interest rate yield on bonds, right, of equal quality over a variation of timelines. And so most of the time, the shorter maturities have a lower yield. So a 90-day a 90-day treasury would have a lower yield than, say, a 10-year treasury, right? And right now, that's just simply not the case. And the reason it's not the case is because there's huge bids right now for 90-day treasury bills here in the U.S., and it's coming from overseas. The demand is coming from overseas, and the bottom line is there's not a lot on the offer. And so, you basically have a shortage of U.S. government paper in the 90-day T-bills. And that's because, again, the Treasury market is the most liquid market in the world. It's where big money, where large pools of capital go when it's looking for safety. And right now, believe you me, it is looking for safety. There's a panic. I don't think that people are paying attention to Turkey. I don't think people understand that European banks that were chasing yield because of the negative interest rates, and we've talked about this in the past, they were chasing yields. They didn't want negative interest rates. They took out a lot of real estate loans. They lent money to each other. There's a lot of Spanish debt that invested in Turkish capital, and now there's no exit. So the bond market, as I've said before, is what I believe is going to be the ticking time bomb, and it's getting closer to going off. And I've said that we need a big significant event and large pools of capital, like the capital that comes from a bond market, a little bit of that to trickle into the gold space. I don't think it's a coincidence that despite the dollar surging, yields doing what they're doing, that gold has held up relatively well. I know it pulled back about $20, $25 here over the past couple of days, but if you actually look at a chart and you correlate that with what the dollar's done, it's held in there pretty well. And I think we're in for a round of volatility over the next several quarters that we haven't seen in quite some time. I think people are mistaken when they say that this inverted yield curve is signaling a recession. It often has. But again, we don't live in a world where we're just in the U.S. with U.S. capital. It really is a village. It's a global village. And I think Europe is just ticking. That's my rant on that. So pay attention to Turkey. Pay attention to 90-day treasury bills, the 10-year. See what that's doing. Look at the dollar. You can see where capital is moving from, and you can see where capital is moving to. Capital is moving to the U.S. dollar.
In one corner, you have the world's central banks and unprecedented interference with monetary policy. In the other corner, you have global debt over $200 trillion. We will see them battle to the death over the next 2 years.
Ding, ding, ding.
So, yeah, the only thing I'd add is every recession over the last 60 years in the United States has been preceded by an inversion of the yield curve, which we're now seeing now, something that I've been writing about and Underground Profits has covered since the second half of 2018. And then on the gold prices side, we discussed last week that it's never as cut and dried as it seemed, that even though we had bounced back to above 1300, that it wouldn't be a straight line up to whatever the benchmarks are, 1374 and 1400. And that is certainly not the case, as we've seen some volatility in the gold price. And also, it just feels from a macro standpoint, if you look at the S&P, like we're either at a crossroads, breaking point's not the right word, but a crossroads or time for something to happen, because basically what's happened is we lost 15% on the S&P in the last quarter of 2018, and we gained 15% in the first quarter of 2019. And so stocks have now turned in their best quarter since 2012, but really all they did was erase the gains from the last quarter of 2018. So we're back to where we were in October of last year. And so just from where I sit looking at the chart, that chart looks like it is now going to grasp for direction, right? Are we going to break back out to new highs, or are we going to have another scare like we did in late 2018? And also, going back to the boxing thing, I started this dumb little thing with how many
Ding, ding,
punches
ding.
how many punches does the Fed have left? Right? We had just in 2018, Jerome Powell saying he was going to continue with tightening, et cetera. But now we've paused and we're sitting at 2.5% federal funds rate. And so they have a little bit of room to walk it back, right? And that's sort of the boxing match I was talking about.
We're going to keep with the boxing analogy. I love boxing. I grew up boxing. I enjoy it. It's a great form of exercise. If you haven't tried it, everybody get out there and do it. It's good for you. But let's keep with the boxing analogy. I don't think the Fed here in the U.S. is the one that is in danger of getting knocked out. I believe the Fed is the one that's got the legs, the stamina, the combinations, the body shots. It's the ECB. I keep saying this. It's the European Central Bank that's in trouble. It's Japan. The Bank of Japan is in trouble. And if you wanna keep with the boxing analogy, how long can we keep this going? You know, if this is a 12-round match that the Fed is in here in the U.S., we're in round one. Japan's been doing this for 30 years. You can stall when you haven't yet dipped your toes into the negative waters, right? And we haven't in the U.S. We're the only major central bank that has yet to dip its toes in that pool of negative interest rates. ECB, Bank of Japan, we could go on and on down the list. So I don't think it's the Fed that's in danger. And I think the capital flight into the U.S. dollar, which I know just pisses off the dollar bears that have saying that have said the dollar is dying, which it is, slowly at a time, but other currencies will go first. I've always made the analogy that we are the cleanest dirty shirt when it comes to global debt. And again, when you mentioned that the U.S. indices are at an inflection point, I think when the Dow and the S&P provides a dividend, when you see all the capital that's fleeing to the U.S., when you see that we have the most liquid market on the planet to absorb large pools of capital with treasuries, I think we are clean as a whistle, and I think stocks are going to continue higher. I'm talking about the major indices now. I think the dollar continues to get stronger for at least a couple of more quarters. And again, don't let that ticking time bomb in Europe go off one day, because if that happens, then we get the dollar, then we get gold rising right alongside it. Stocks in the U.S. would do well. So, I'm a lot more nervous if I'm a European central banker than if I'm Mr. Powell. That's my take.
Well, yeah, for sure. And so we should jump into the gold stocks now, which I know we wanted to talk about, because we talk about how gold is a safe haven and how in times of uncertainty and money printing, etc., um, destruction of debt bubbles, whatever your, catalyst, pick your catalyst there. But gold should do well, and in turn, junior mining stocks should do well. But we know that inherently, junior mine
Contraire, my friend. But continue.
junior mining stocks are inherently speculative and risky and dangerous. And then you add in some of the iniquitous, I would say, market activities that occur in financing some of those speculations. It can become a very dangerous sector. And so, Miramont, did you want to talk about that? And then we can talk about a couple of other companies that sort of expose the risks in this sector.
Absolutely. Let's start with where money is fleeing from, not fleeing to, and that would be Miramont Resources. Look, we're in the business. We get the phone calls. We get the whispers. We've all heard whispers. Anybody that has a half decent network in the junior resource space has been hearing whispers since January, coincidentally, the last time that Miramont Resources did a private placement, a financing at, I believe, 35 cents. And I'm freestyling here. But, we've heard whispers that they were on to a discovery in Peru that they had hit, that there was a 6-hole program, that assays weren't back yet, but everything looked good. The stock price acted accordingly. It went, I think, from a low of 10, 11 cents, and I can pull it up here in just a second, to a high of something like the mid-60s Canadian. And, they were supposed to initiate a 6 drill hole program. Those holes were supposed to be released one at a time. That's what, and kudos and shout out to Bob Moriarty, who had an excellent piece. We'll post a link, but he really detailed this really well. But the company was supposed to release these drill holes one at a time as the assays came in. And we all know what happened now, right? The holes were trash. They didn't release them one at a time. We get a news release a couple of days ago that says, here is a drill update, and the stock goes from 60 cents down to where it currently trades at about 13 cents. So we went from a 52-week low of 12.5 cents to a 52-week high of 63 cents on whispers, and now we're right back to where we started from. The company did its financing. It was a $1 million non-brokered private placement, and you essentially have dusters. Now, I don't know when the assays were received by management. I do know that the board has called a meeting. I do know that Bob Moriarty thinks that the president of Miramont, Mr. Bill Pincus, lied to him. And again, I haven't spoken with Mr. Pincus. I'm not very familiar with him. We don't have an ongoing dialogue or relationship in any shape, way, or form. But it looks like, sounds like, and has all the hallmarks of a whisper campaign meant to drive up the share price, to do a financing while they were sitting on assays that they knew were less than stellar. And I'm being generous there. So I'll let you opine.
And opine I will. I'm not really too familiar with the Miramont story, but this points toward something that I've wanted to talk about on this show for a couple of weeks, and something that frankly has given the junior mining space a bad name for decades, and that's the iniquitous market activities that go on, and that just basically means unfair. And that can manifest in a variety of ways, right? One could be the company sitting on assays that they know are trash, for example. One could be raising a lot of money cheaply and accruing large enough positions that should be registered as insiders but aren't because they're in numbered accounts somewhere or in other people's names, and then anonymous selling shows up that deters the share price from ascending and from the company to be able to develop a real base that they can grow from. Or
can I stop you real quick, Nick? Can I ask something? Can I ask you to explain for people that may not be as familiar with the space and that don't understand what you mean by not registering their shares or disclosing their position? You don't mean, and I know you do, but you don't mean that, CEOs and insiders would have their wife hold shares and their girlfriend hold shares and their girlfriend's girlfriend hold shares so that they don't have to report those shares. Is that what you mean?
I do mean that, and unfortunately, that goes on all the time, and a lot more than people know. And then people, you wonder where the selling is coming from, and oftentimes it's coming from insiders that aren't reporting. It's like Occam's razor, right? It's like the simplest solution is often the right one. And then there's other things, right? I could just come up with examples off the top of my head, like back when lithium was booming in 2015, I took a trip to Nevada where all these companies were staking ground because Albemarle was operating there. And I was talking to a land prospector who'd been doing this for, I don't know, 40 years, a white-haired gentleman. And he was saying that these junior companies were coming in and staking ground that he knows darn well there's never been any lithium on, and he knows there hasn't been any lithium there since the 1970s, for example. But nonetheless, these companies were coming in and staking ground and running a promote, right? And how does that all go down? Well, you have a shell company, or you reverse merge an asset into a company. You finance it, sort of like we were just talking about, and maybe some of those shares go in a numbered account or into somebody's wife's name, and right, and then they run a whole promotion on an asset that they know from the beginning has no chance of becoming a mine, or has no chance of discovering economic ore. This would be called a moose pasture promote or something like that. But it's even more underhanded than that. And the more time you spend with the industry, and the closer you get to the wizard, or the closer you get to the source where you see how the sausage is made and how these companies are financed, and then you come across people who are just warrant clippers, who are short-term shareholders. And not to say that that's illegal or wrong, but it certainly doesn't help a company develop. And then there's backroom deals of asset swaps and share crosses that never become public, and it's just really a tough place for a new person to do business. And it's given the junior industry a bad name for a long, long time. And I'm just going to keep going because I want to talk about the mining narrative as well. So you have this industry that is already inherently risky, right? Because we know 1 in 1,000 targets becomes a mine. So the deck of cards is already stacked against you. But then you have nefarious financing activities, and you have a market that hasn't cooperated in nearly a decade. And you have people who are interested in this business as a way of maintaining their lifestyle, financing companies to collect paychecks as opposed to financing companies to develop assets and reward all shareholders. And it just doesn't. It's just not a good look for the industry, right? And then so that's like the back door. That's like behind the scenes, and then front facing. It's not any better, right? Because mining is an extractive industry that has a bad name, sort of like coal. I mean, it's pollutive. It's done with acid. We're digging holes in the ground. Probably as an industry aren't as good as at reclamation and damage control as it should be. And so it's just become a tough industry to almost be a positive on and want to invest in and feel good to invest in. And so we'll talk about a couple more companies here in a second, but really this is just a call to the mining industry to say you got to position yourselves better, and I'm starting to see some of that. So one thing I wanted to talk about, and sorry, I'm just eating up a lot of time, but I'm going to keep going.
Is good. This is why we're here.
Is Apple has tried to quote in quotes kill the mining industry, right? They've tried to institute recovery programs where people recycle their phones. They've tried to invest in technology that can extract the key minerals from older technologies, circuit
Mm-hmm.
boards and stuff that they can repurpose the copper and the silver and the gold from. And what they found basically is that it just doesn't fucking work. There's no way that they can meet the scale of
Oops.
the resources they need to make however many billions of phones with recycling. And so they're starting to look at the mining industry now and how can it be greened up? And there's a lot of ways, some of which that will turn into good investments, like switching from diesel equipment to electric and investing in projects that are doing quality remediation or cleaning up a site as a result of their operations. And I don't know, that's pretty much the end of the rant, but come on, mining industry.
What are some questions that the novice speculator in this space should ask? Basic questions when considering sending, hard-earned capital potentially to money heaven, as Rick Rule likes to refer to it. What can you ask if you're new to this business? What should you be asking management teams? And again, it's tough. When I see somebody like Bob Moriarty, who's got a wealth of experience and contacts and a broad network of people, and someone that is pretty thorough in his due diligence, when he's this upset about getting duped, God, it really does feel like we're swimming against the tide, right?
Well, like I said, we are swimming against the tide. I mean, it's inherently risky to begin with, and then you add in all this other stuff to the soup, and it just becomes a mire of a soup. The questions you should be asking, and you and I have presented on this at many conferences,
Right.
are the top of the list: share structure, right? Who owns the shares at what price? When was the last financing? When does it come free trading? What is the cost basis of the large shareholders? Are they escrowed? Do they have a tie-up agreement? Are they all registered in their name if they have a large position? If not, where are they registered and why? Those are the big share structure questions. And then you get into the asset and the experience of the team, et cetera. But really, and I've said this a million times, no matter what kind of company I'm looking at, if it's a cannabis company or a resource company or a biotech, it really doesn't matter. It's share structure first. How is the company put together? Where did those shares go, and how much were they sold for initially? How much skin in the game does the management team have? How aligned with shareholders are they? How much of their own money did they put in the deal, et cetera?
I like it. I like it. That's a good quick primer on how to go about that. Yeah, we got to do better. Let's highlight. I know you had a couple of other stocks that you wanted to talk about and some points to touch on, Nick, and I want to do that in just a second. But let's highlight some companies that do it the right way and why I defend these companies so passionately because frankly there's not a lot that do things the right way. I'll highlight two, and I'll just be real brief because I've spoken about both of these in the past. Midas Gold in Idaho, Almaden Minerals in Mexico. Both of those companies do community relations, reclamation on the Midas side. Their approach to the environment, the way they engage with the community. I encourage people to go to the Midas Gold and Almaden Minerals website and look through their news releases and just see the amount of information that you, the potential speculator, is provided as to the effort that they are putting in to make sure that they do things the right way. That goes from drilling to cleaning it up to working with the community, engaging the community, training locals, hiring locally when possible. Those are companies that do it right. So when I see people on the internet behind a keyboard typing away random shit from time to time to people that frankly don't deserve it, hey, I look and I could shoot 1,000 shots, right? And I'd hit every single one. This is a space that has waste left and right. It's beyond me why sometimes the good guys in the business actually get shots sent their way, and it's why I like to shoot back on behalf of those people. So, pardon the shooting analogy.
Well, I was just gonna say, sometimes the best guys and the best teams have things come out of left field, or at the end of the day, the rocks are the rocks, and those are the risks that you have to deal with in this industry. That's why you try to find the best people to mitigate all the other risks, right? All the stuff that you just talked about, the community relations and transparency and how you raise money and excessive information on drilling campaigns and how they're spending money. You want people who are transparent and all that because, as we say, the rocks are risky enough, and there's political risk everywhere. So let's talk about Ethos, a company you and I have both financed. I woke up this morning.
You woke up like
scratched.
this, down 20%.
Yes, I woke up. I scratched my eyes, and I learned that Ethos's main asset might be on some British Columbian ground that they want to make protected. So the stock went down 20%, and it's like, well, where did that come from? Ethos has a good team. You would think they did diligence with the government when they stake this ground, and seemingly comes out of left field. You might have a bit more insight, but it just speaks to how things cannot go your way, even when you have, a good share structure. I mean, that's a company with a good share structure with $7 or $8 million in the bank, if I'm not mistaken, with quality geologists, with multiple projects in good jurisdictions that have, all the right indicators, one for vanadium and one for gold. Everything's looking good. And then, you wake up hoping to feel good on a Friday, and boom, the government's going to take your project or is looking to take your project or whatever. And that's not in, Papua New Guinea or somewhere in Africa or Venezuela. That's Canada. So what are your thoughts?
My thoughts are this. First, Ethos Gold. I'm familiar with Craig Roberts. I'm biased. I'm a shareholder. I participated in the most recent financing, still own my shares, plan on owning my shares. And the reason for that is because they also have a very prospective gold project that's due to be drilled here in the next month. It's an inexpensive drill program, approximately $350,000, that'll test the targets that they feel are the most likely to yield a discovery. And I think, frankly, the cash position and that project alone merit the current market cap that the company has. So I'll start by saying that they have a market cap of about 11.5 million after the 20% hit today, and they back about 6.5 to 7 million of that up with cash. So that's a company that's going to do well regardless of what happens with their Pine Pass vanadium project. Now, in fairness to Craig and his team, the news from this morning was discovered because of their engaging with the British Columbian government and the First Nations. And so what's happened is there's a draft partnership agreement. So this is just a draft. Kudos to Ethos for disclosing it right up front, right? We don't wait until the draft goes up for vote, is passed, and you're contending it, and then announce it to shareholders. So I want to say that we want to highlight the bad in the business. Let's highlight some of the good. They could have sat on this. They could have said, hey, it's not material. It's just a draft. This is just a discussion that the British Columbian government and the First Nations groups are having about this potential project. It's a draft. And so kudos to them on that front. Do we believe that this ends well for the Pine Vanadium project? I don't know enough to say that confidently. The draft partnership agreement that we just mentioned is proposing an immediate interim habitat protection measure for critical areas that happen to coincide where some of this project lies. So we will see how that is resolved. CEO Craig Roberts, his quote was, "Certainly we are concerned about the proposed imposition of restrictions on our vanadium projects, and we intend to make a robust submission to the province to defend the interest of Ethos and its shareholders." Look, fair enough. You disclosed it the minute you heard about it. We know we can take that into consideration, and we as shareholders can decide, do we want to sell or do we hold for drilling at the La Purísima gold project in Mexico and hope that they're able to leverage their cash position, a potential discovery on the gold project, that they're able to leverage that into much higher share prices, regardless of what happens with the vanadium asset. So I'll leave that there.
Yeah, I'm with you. Like you, I participated in the last placement. I don't even think you can sell those shares until later in April. But anyway, not looking to sell. Always have the long-term time frame in mind when going into these speculations, and exactly hoping the team can take that other asset and you know, lemonade and lemons and all that.
Absolutely. Let's talk about Azúcar Minerals because I mentioned Almaden. Almaden is run by Morgan Poliquin, Chairman Dwayne Poliquin. I'm familiar and friendly with both. I'll put that out there. I'm biased. Those two gentlemen have been very generous with their time. They were generous to me 10, 11 years ago when I was starting to dabble in this business, and I am not a geologist, so I always have a lot of non-geologist person questions. So with that being said, there was a piece done by, and I'm not going to give the website any attention, but there was a piece done by a website which, basically was like, it was pretty much a hit piece. I mean, the piece went and attacked Morgan and Azúcar Minerals for not drilling more than one target. So they highlighted all of the holes that were drilled into the Norte zone. And they said basically it's a waste of time and a waste of shareholder money to continue to drill holes there. Why don't you drill some of the other shitty targets, I think is what it said. And so it was actually funny to me because on that same day, Azúcar puts out a news release that they just discovered a new target. It's, kilometers away from the Norte zone. Oh, yeah, by the way, we have 3 drill rigs turning. We're drilling 3 different targets. They're drilling an area that has a 5-kilometer strike with multiple potential porphyry centers. It's a 2-year drill program that's got the blessing of Newcrest. So, again, I'm not a geologist, and I sure in the heck don't have the due diligence resources that Newcrest has. But this is a company that came in and put not an insignificant amount of money at much higher prices on the premise that the system, the mineralized system and the project, which I've been to personally, had potential for not just a small, good grade tonnage project like the Norte Zone. The Norte Zone may have 40, 50 million tons starting from surface in an area with amazing infrastructure. That would be a great starter pit for a smaller company. That's not what the prize is here. The prize is what's down at depth and the potential for a monster because of the alteration that they've seen over this 5-kilometer strike. So, look, anytime you're dealing for porphyries over a 5-kilometer strike, it's going to cost money. It's going to take time. Not every drill hole is going to hit. But to put out a piece that says, why aren't they drilling anything else? When all you have to do is go to the fucking website and look and see that they actually are drilling multiple targets. You talk about wasting shareholder money. Well, I'm a shareholder. I happen to know that Azúcar owns its own drills and drills for a third of what most companies operating in Mexico drill for. Not only that, I've been to the project. I've spoken to the locals. I've spoken to the geologists, the gentleman that runs the team down there. Most of the people working on the project are locals from the communities the project is located in. Morgan and his team go down there. They train them. They develop them. They have apprenticeship programs. They engage with the community. This isn't a situation where they're contracting out and all the 17-year-old girls end up pregnant after a 3-month drilling campaign. That doesn't happen with the Poliquins. And so when I see a piece that criticizes the approach and it's just not factual, pisses me off a little bit. Now, we could argue about the grades, and again, I'm not a geologist. You can say that I don't like the rocks. You could say a lot of those results have been low grade. You could say a million things about whether or not the project is your cup of tea. That is all fair. And like you said early in this podcast, the exception is success, right? The rule is almost always that it's not going to work. But attack it on the merits of that. Don't just write something that somebody else is going to read and maybe not have the network to reach out and figure out the facts. And they say, oh, I'm staying away, and maybe they miss out on a good speculation. Or they own it and they sell because you have somebody that's supposed to be a very talented, amazing geologist thinks it's a shit show over there when that's not the case. That's it.
Well, I was going to mention the grade, which was mentioned in that report that some of the holes were, I think it was something like nobody cares about, zero point 0.3 grams a ton gold and whatever, 0.14 copper or whatever it was. But what I would point to is where the project came from, the pedigree, right? It's a spin out from Almadex, which is the sort of generative arm of the Poliquin's three companies. And so clearly they thought it had enough merit, as did Newcrest, to spin it out on its own and advance it as a standalone flagship. So, that's not to say that things can't change, and maybe there's not a deeper porphyry that's higher grade, but clearly this wasn't for shits and giggles.
Yeah, and just don't tell me that they're not drilling other targets. And when they're doing kilometer wide step outs, don't tell me that all the holes are going into the same place. And frankly, call Morgan and ask him why he's doing that. I did an interview for Resource Stock Digest with Morgan recently where I asked him that exact question. How do you respond to people that say, this is a shit show of a drill campaign. You're drilling all these holes right next to each other. And his answer, and again, you'll get a more nuanced answer from him, but his answer was, look, for a year we thought this was trending one way. Turns out it's trending in the other direction. And so every hole for us, because it's so cheap to drill, is important. So if we're drilling 25 and 50 meters apart, it's for a reason. We're trying to understand something geologically that we just haven't grasped a hold of, and all of that is important. So I don't have any problem with anybody attacking grade. And again, it was funny because the day that they challenged the fact that they weren't drilling anything else, Asukat announces not only did they discover a new target, but the grades were solid. They were deep, but it was 28.5 meters of 1.66 grams per ton gold and 0.33% copper. Is that economic? Who knows? It's a brand new target, right? Maybe not. Probably not at 3, 4, 5, 600 meters down. But if it's smoke before they get to the fire, that's how discoveries are made. And so attacking the grade, fair game, absolutely. Attacking and lying about the fact that they're not drilling anything else and that all they're doing is drilling the same thing over and over, and that it's a waste of shareholder money, I'll take issue with that as a shareholder because I disagree respectfully.
What else do you want to get off your chest?
Oh, what do we got? Let's see. The Mueller Report, since we all have opinions. Thoughts on the Mueller Report? It's a trick question.
Only that, gosh, there was so much buildup in the media that.
You said it, in the media. Keep going.
Yeah, Trump was treasonous, and this was going to be the nail in the coffin. And I'll put up a link to a montage of how many times they said, this was it. There was collusion. Trump's going to get impeached. It's over. And then, surprise, surprise, no collusion in a 400 and some page report that still nobody has read except for the attorney general. But the disappointment was palpable. And that's sort of a fundamental problem. You shouldn't be wanting your president to get impeached, whether you voted for him or not. It's not two teams. We're the same country. We're the same nation. And Rachel Maddow just literally crying on air after facts came out. I mean, we'll call them facts because it was an independent investigation, right?
Yeah,
I didn't care which way it came out. It doesn't matter to me. I'm no Trump fan, But clearly, after this thorough investigation, it was all I won't call it a hoax, but clearly propagated by the media, and so just only served it as a distraction, really, for the past year and a half. And that's all I got on it. I did see some funny things about. Adam Schiff, who I've had to watch on Meet the Press for the last couple of months, go on there and
much to Lindsay's dismay,
how much dirt he had on the president and how he should, resign or should be impeached and how all this stuff was going to come out. And And now there was nothing, and I saw a meme that said we're going to go after him now because we've got definitive proof that he tore the tag off his mattress in 1987. So I don't know, just way overblown from the liberal side of the media, and that's really all I got.
Yeah, and I'll counter that by saying it's also been overblown by the right, by the Republican side, because nobody's read the fucking thing yet, including me. So I can't tell you, no collusion, that's clear in the summary, right? But it also said it didn't exonerate him. A ton of people have gone to prison and been indicted as a result of the report. So it wasn't in vain, I don't believe. I think every honest American would want to know if something's going on. I do put the blame on the media, like with most things, right? The CNNs, the Fox News Network, MSNBC, all of those, right? They all hyped this up because it was easy. Oh, I mean, come on, this is clickbait, baby. This was good, right? Is he going to get indicted? Is Ivanka's pretty self going to jail? Is, Don Jr.'s animal hunting self going to prison? Is, what are they going to discover? Woo, woo, woo. That was never what this was about. This was a report done by a gentleman that now even Donald Trump says acted honorably after 2 years of calling him a witch hunter and everything else. He obviously did his job. And as an American, I'm glad my president wasn't colluding with Russia. I was hoping he wasn't colluding with Russia. I disagree with Mr. Trump on many, many, many things. I don't care for him much personally. But yeah, I didn't want him to be in cahoots with the Russians. He's running the country, everybody. Like, I can't understand that line of reasoning other than so many people have been brainwashed by whatever news network they watch into believing a certain narrative. The whole Trump family is going to prison, or this is all a witch hunt that has yielded nothing. Neither one of those points were true. The truth, as always, was somewhere in the middle. And frankly, the truth is there's a lot we'll likely never know, right? That's the nature of politics in Washington, D.C. and in the United States of America. So keep it factual, people.
Unfortunately, that's the nature of politics in Washington, D.C. and America. Exactly right. Unnamed sources, backdoor deals, public officials saying things without name. It's always an official, right? So, yeah, that's where we live.
What I will say is this. Mr. Trump is in danger of Jussie Smolletting himself. Now, for those that don't know who Jussie Smollett is, he is the self-described gay Tupac who was beat down by MAGA-wearing thugs, according to him. A noose was put around his neck and bleach was poured on him. It later turned out, apparently, that he had staged this entire attack. And there were no MAGA-wearing thugs. There was no noose. There was no bleach. Mr. Smollett went on TV and repeatedly stuck to his lie. It pissed the Chicago Police Department off enough to where they hit him with an indictment of 16 felony counts. And now we're going to talk about privilege and money in America. Those 16 felony counts were subsequently magically dismissed. Zero record, zero accountability for faking the attack. This little guy gets up there again and sticks to his lie and says, I've been factual from the beginning. I am my mother's son. I don't have a lying bone in my body, right? And so now the Chicago Police Department is furious. They want the $130,000 they spent investigating this back. They don't understand why the law wasn't applied. Two things. Obviously, Mr. Smollett is very well connected. 16 felonies in Chicago don't just go away. Not for a $10,000 bond and not for some community service. That just doesn't happen in a case as public as this. As for the Chicago Police Department, and I'm there every year, so I'm sure I'll see y'all soon, man, fuck you guys. Like, this is one of the most corrupt departments in the country that's paid out hundreds of millions of dollars in settlements because of their corruption and all the stuff that they've done. Not all police officers in Chicago are bad, but there's a good solid pool of bad police officers, and I never hear the good ones call them out on any of it. So for the Chicago Police Department to have multiple press conferences day after day about how offended they are that the law wasn't applied, That upsets me a little bit and gets me on a rant because anytime there is a shooting of an unarmed teenager, mostly minority kid, in a mostly low-income neighborhood, Chicago Police Department comes out and says, hey, our officers were cleared. We're not here to apply the law, or we're here to enforce the law. We're not here to decide who gets charged with what and how the legal system deals with it. So, hey, you don't like Jussie Smollett? I'm sure he'll be getting pulled over a lot more. But don't go making these press conferences. Rahm Emanuel, of all people, right? The mayor's up there as well. Don't go doing press conferences about the application of the law. Your job isn't that. Your job isn't to charge people. Your job isn't. No, you go arrest and catch some bad guys. That's it. I'm done with that one. So where I was going before I got on my rant. I think Mr. Trump is in danger of Jussie Smolletting himself. I think he's going to talk this up so much about how innocent he is that he's going to end up getting himself, and I always have a conspiracy theory, so this is the one for the week. He's going to end up getting himself in trouble on something less serious, but serious enough to give him a headache.
Well, it's been fun to watch. It'll be fun to continue to see it unfold. Mr. Smollett should obviously be held accountable, and I'm not as up to date as I should be on the most recent thing, although it seemed shady as hell, man, with the sealing of the thing. And then someone told me yesterday, somebody told me yesterday that the judge said she accidentally sealed it. She didn't mean to seal it. And so I don't know, maybe I'll read about it and report back next week. But yeah, I mean, look, we said it in the topic before, backroom deals. You never know really what went down. And, that's why transparency is really important.
Agreed. What do we got? I think, you know what, Nick? I could go on forever. I was going to talk about the Purdue drug kingpin crime family and their $220 million settlement. That one also really riles me up. Let's save that for next week. We can tie it into, again, justice in America and how if you have enough money and know the right people, you can literally have thousands and thousands and hundreds of thousands of people affected fatally, and you stay out of prison if you have enough money. You just get a fine, right? And we'll talk about that. We'll get into the details next week. I get the feeling more shoes will drop there. Feel good stories, Nick. What do you got? I've been ranting. Can I share my one feel good story?
Sure.
Baseball's back. My Cubs won 12-4. The pitching looked good. The hitting was great. I think we're going to the World Series. I say it every year. I was right in 2016. I've been wrong all the other years since 1984 when I became a Cub fan at 6 years old. So baseball's back, though. It made me smile. I love watching Cub games. Diehard Cub fan. Will be in Chicago this summer at Wrigley, and that puts a smile on my face.
We'll soon have 3 kids under 3, so no time for a 3-hour baseball game. And
that's why I started Orioles. Young, Nick. I started at 19. I was like, let me knock these kids out of the way.
The Orioles have debuted in the power rankings dead last in the league, and that would be my team if I was interested. But seems like a good year to be sitting out. We got a new manager, and all our good players went bye-bye. Machado is gone. So what they're calling a rebuilding year for the Orioles. It's really been a rebuilding decade. So don't think I'm missing too much, although, I do like baseball. Here are my stories for the week. We call them positive and informative. So these are a bit more informative than positive, though. Fewer Subway restaurants to me is always a positive thing. And I read this week that there's really a lot of Subways. Like there's many thousands more Subways than McDonald's. Maybe they just hide them better. That's why, and they don't have the giant golden arches. That's why you don't see them as much. But anyway, last year there was over 27,000, or 2 years ago there was over 27,000 Subway franchises. And we're now down to just a year or two later, 24,000 Subway stores, over 1,000. I think the number was like 1,100 Subway stores closed last year. So What were my points on that going to be? One, good. We don't need 27,000 freaking Subway stores. Eat something better. Two, uh, you know,
As my wife texts me and asks
it,
me if I want some Subway.
do you, um, once the $5 footlong thing has ended, when's the last time you saw a $5 jingle, right? That was sort of, I think, what made them ubiquitous and why you stopped in there, right? For a $5 meatball or a $5 Italian. That's gone. And so I don't think they're seeing as much traffic. And the other thing is, don't forget, Jared is a pedophile. And that certainly didn't do them any favors when their main spokesman was hit with those charges. And so nothing really too bad against Subway. If it's the only spot between me and an airport or me and my house and my stomach is growling, I'll hit you up for the 6-inch meatball Subway. I will, but we don't need 27,000 of you. So there's an informative story. And the other one was, and this is more interesting actually.
The pigs.
We have found the world's largest T-Rex and one of the oldest. So we now know that T-Rexes got bigger and lived longer than we first thought. This guy was 28 years old and weighed almost 19 tons or no, excuse me, I'm sorry, 19,000 pounds, 19,000 and a half pounds. So bigger than a full-grown elephant. And it was found in Saskatchewan. So maybe some uranium companies should become archaeologists. And they've got 60%. Thanks, you got it. Thanks.
T-Rex uranium.
They've got 60% of the skeleton, and they have learned some other things. Like he had some bone protruding through some teeth in his mouth, and they learned that that was a sign of infection, and he had a broken bone. So they learned that he must have been in some we'll bring it back to boxing, some sparring matches with another T-Rex. And he also had some damage on his tail, seemingly had been bitten on the tail by another T-Rex. So fascinating stuff that we can learn about what happened 68 million years ago when Saskatchewan was a subtropical paradise and T-Rexes were biting each other in the tail. Amazing, amazing science.
Fascinating stuff. Fascinating stuff. Are we going to talk about the pigs? I saw it.
The pigs are
Yeah.
The pigs are important. Yeah, we should talk about the pigs. I haven't really seen, it's not been like blasted on Reuters or AP, but I've seen murmurs of it elsewhere, and it came from feed reports. There wasn't really any direct reports that all these pigs were dying, but we learned that the amount of swine food that China was buying or consuming was down 30%. And so let's talk about China and pigs. They have a lot of pigs, over 300 million pigs. And let's talk about that in context. That's the U.S. has like I forget the number. It's like 70 million pigs, 75 million pigs, and Canada has like 15 million pigs. And so, gosh, China has well over 3 times the amount of pigs as the U.S. They eat a lot of pork, right? Look at any take the Chinese food menu out of your takeout drawer in your kitchen and look how many more pork dishes there are than any other dishes. Anyway, they eat a lot of pork. And so if they're not ordering 30% of the feed that they normally would order, that means that about 100 million pigs have died or are dying. That's a lot of pigs. And so the consequences of this would be, first of all, you should know that it's from African swine flu. That's why these pigs are dying. So we don't want to be having these pigs imported to the U.S. Two, even if we gave China all the pigs in North America, it wouldn't make up for the ones that are presumably dead. And so why this matters is it could end the trade impasse because China needs some pork.
There you go. It all comes back to the pigs.
Yeah, really interesting stuff.
Pigs are good for copper.
Why is that?
Because if we end the trade war, I see copper going to 315, 320 in short order a couple of months afterwards, right? I think that's capping the price right now. It keeps flirting with $3 a pound. And I think if that is negotiated and it does end the trade war, I think China has to continue to stimulate. We've talked about stimulation in the past and stimulus. And yeah, I think that's good for copper. I think it's good for base metals. I can't help but notice zinc has surged past 130 the last that I checked a few days ago. So yeah, I pigs are good for base metals.
Stimulus.
Well
And speaking
done,
of
sir.
stimulus, I should add before we get to the stock of the week, one of the 4,000 Democrats running for president is proposing to base her campaign exclusively on, not exclusively, but a central pillar of her campaign on infrastructure, which is something that you had said to keep an eye out for in a previous episode of this podcast. So Amy Klobuchar
Yep.
has said that she wants to make infrastructure spending a central pillar of her campaign because it resonates with both sides of the aisle. And so there you go. It's starting to percolate into the mainstream.
Agreed. And I think it's an easy sell from both major parties here. I think it's an easy sell if you're in China. I think when I look at European GDP numbers, it's an easy sell there. And it's an easy sell because it's necessary. Infrastructure around the world is in tough shape. So high paying jobs, increase in tax revenues. Yeah, good for copper, good for zinc. Zinc's at 136 as we speak, 136 a pound. It was just 125, 30 days ago. So there you go. Nice move in zinc. Let's do stock of the week, Nick. What do you got?
I was going to talk about Trump and Russia again. There's this Section 232 thing working its way through Commerce about how we need to produce more uranium domestically in the U.S. And that report is due out of Commerce by April 14th. It's something I've talked about on this podcast before, and as a result highlighted a company called Energy Fuels and another company called Azarga Uranium. And I can't help but think now that Trump has been quote unquote exonerated by the Mueller Report for
No collusion.
That's pretty good. Right. So why wouldn't he want to stick his finger in the liberals' eyes anymore and say, not only was I not colluding with Russia, I want to make America so great that I'm going to take this 232 measure so we can make more uranium here in America and buy less from Russian and Russian-controlled entities. It just seems like something that's up his alley. And so I wanted to highlight the third company that I've been writing about and recommending as a result of this 232 thing coming, and that's Uranium Energy Corp, UEC on the New York Stock Exchange. A liquid company, one that investors really flock to in a uranium bull market, or when they want to buy a uranium equity because it's listed on a major exchange and it is liquid. They have projects built and approved using a hub and spoke method of in situ recovery in South Texas, near where you are, Gerardo, and has just generally been a good performer in uranium bull markets, and is run by a gentleman in Miramont who really knows how to promote. And I can only imagine the kind of oomph he would put behind a UEC promote if we were to get a positive 232 decision and any sort of a bull market or a better pricing mechanism in the U.S. And so just wanted to highlight UEC.
Worth noting, completely unhedged.
Yeah, that's right. They don't have any contracts. And so they're exactly right. Zero hedge. They're free to harness all the upside of increasing uranium prices.
Completely unhedged sounded better than they don't have any contracts, Nick. You got to get your promoting skills up, man. Come on. I'm going to talk about K92 mining. I'll be perfectly honest with you. This is a story that we've followed for a while. They're a sponsor on Resource Stock Digest. I like the people. I liked the team. I always liked the project. The one thing that kept me away was the jurisdiction. That was somewhat validated and reinforced, a little over a year ago when they had a minor situation on site that luckily was just property damage. And at that time, any thoughts I had about dipping my toes in that water were gone immediately. And all that's happened since then. The stock was at 46 cents and now trades above the 150 level. Not only are they producing, not only are they cash flow positive, not only are they in the midst of a 20,000 meter drill program, they have an incredible cash cost, among the lowest in the business, but now it appears that they may be on to a new discovery that could be pretty significant. And again, we talked about exploration and grades, and we talked about it with Azúcar. The assays themselves weren't spectacular. It's 175 meters of 0.28 grams per ton gold and 0.22% copper from about 259 meters. So that, you look at the numbers in themselves and you say, meh, not that big of a deal. What is interesting is the mineral package that suggests that it's proximal. This target is proximal to a large, robust gold, copper, porphyry system. And again, porphyries are so important because of how large they can be and the wealth they create. And so this is something that I had the pleasure of speaking with CEO John Lewins about yesterday. We will put a link up to the interview. You can listen to that, and he can give you a much more nuanced explanation about why they're excited about this Blue Lake porphyry prospect. But K92 Mining, I think they have to be looked at as a takeout target. They deliver. I mean, look at their website. They deliver a positive news release, it seems like, every week and a half or two, and I don't think they're slowing down anytime soon. So K92 Mining, ticker symbol KNT on the Venture Exchange, KNTNF, over-the-counter bulletin board.
I got to pound my chest, Gerardo. Financed that company when it was at 35 cents, so $1.50 isn't bad work if you can get it.
With a warrant, best newsletter in the business, Nick's Notebook. I'll put that one up results-wise against anybody else. A close second, though different, is Exploration Insights by Joe Mazumdar and Brent Cook. They have an excellent, excellent newsletter as well, a lot more in-depth when it comes to the geology of it. But as far as a newsletter that gives you early access, private access to deal flow, that service you have, Nick's Notebook, is worth its weight in gold. I encourage any accredited investor that is speculating in the space to do themselves a favor and take a peek. It's done absolutely phenomenal. It's not just resources, it's a variety of sectors. Take a peek, Nick's Notebook. That's my plug for you, Nick.
I try my best. That's very generous and much appreciated.
The superlatives were light in the intro, so I figured I'd save them for the end.
Got to make up for it.
Nick, anything else? I think we went through it. We could do this for another hour, but we got to save something for next week.
No, let me get back to looking at mining stocks.
I like it. Episode 12, Bizarro World, everybody. Have a great week.